In our first video, we went through opening up the program and actually opening up a pre-made motion document. And in this document, they have dates, they have photos, and they have graphics. What this lesson is about is taking those dates and moving them around with behavior animation. And so we started by adding 3 effects. We have a spin, fade in, fade out, and grow shrink. Opening up our HUD, you can see the availability of each one. And the spin, you have your moving on one axis, and then you can tell it to move on another axis at the same time by moving the inner circle. And I'm going to play this, and so you can see what we did before. And if I move this, you can sort of see as it's going through, it's changing it. So I can actually change what directions I want this to move into axes. Another way that I can change it is by going to the inspector, Command 3, and then changing my behaviors X, Y, or Z axis. So I'm going to leave it at custom, just right here, and if I needed to, I could change my latitude or longitude. I could also change some of the other options for the other behaviors. One quick feature for your HUD, sorry, press the D on the keyboard and it shifts to your next behavior. So I can press this quickly and say I want to change my grow shrink. By pressing the D, I can quickly get to it through the HUD. So we have finished with the first date. Now we're going to go to the second date, and we're going to go to 1985, but we need to change our play range. So I'm going to do what we did before, Shift I, and then Command Option I, and that moves our playhead to this layer. Now I have to make sure I've selected that layer, otherwise it won't work. And then Shift O, and then Command Shift O will move my playhead to that spot as well. So in 1985, we're going to go back to our library so we can get to our behaviors and basic motion. And before we really, in 1984, we used two-dimensional and threw in another one to simulate 3D, but it really wasn't 3D. In 1985, we're going to apply 3D layers, or a 3D effect. So I'm going to apply throw to 1985. And in my HUD, when I select throw, I have this option of a 2D and 3D. If I just have it 2D, I'm going to move my arrow to where I want this to end up, and I can follow along with the red line and how far I want to take it out. And if I change this to 3D, you'll see that this is a more 3D-ish type of arrow. But when I move it here, it changes to a globe or a sphere. And so I can move it in 2 directions, 3 directions, Or I can go to my inspector and Command 3, and you can see right here it has a little triangle. I can change what axis I'm using. So my Z is in a negative because I'm pushing it back to where it's pointed away from me. Now if I just wanted it to be completely just Z, I would make the arrow just go backward. And then when I played it, you see that it's going away from me and it looks getting smaller by accomplishing this. So I can move my globe to where I want it to be, and I still see my little red line telling me how it's moving. And if I wanted to get it smaller, I just kind of push back a little bit more. I can also increase how far it goes and how fast it goes by changing the speed of which this happens. So it should move back a little bit faster now. I also want to add my spin and my fade in and fade out from 1984 to this layer in 1985. So I'm going to hold the Option button down on the keyboard and drag those effects to 1985. And it's the same effects there. So now in 1985, we've added a spin and a throw and a fade in and fade out. Now I'm going to move my play range back a little bit to where 1984 is, and then I'm going to turn on 1984 so we can see both of these at the same time in our range. So 1984 just goes straight back into the void, if you will, and 1985 goes at an angle and then fades out. It's spinning along and fades out at the end. So I'm going to turn off 1984, and I'm also going to turn off 1985 because we're going to move to the next one, which is 1986. For 1986, we're going to use a different type of behavior, but I still need to select that one first. So with my 1986 layer selected, Shift-I, and then Command-Option-I, and then Shift-O, and then Command-Option-O. So now my play range for 1986, and then I need to turn on my visibility. For this one, the throw behavior, which we used in 1985, is great for animating a layer in a specific direction at a specific speed. But if we want the layer to change direction, then we need to use a different type of behavior. So for going back to our library, we're going to use the motion path. And you can read up here, motion moves an object along a motion path created with control points. So we're going to apply that to our 1986 layer, and you see that it has a line with it. We can see the beginning dot, but we can't see the other one, so we need to change our fit. We need to change it to 50 so we can make this picture smaller so we can actually see the other end of it. So we can see both ends of the motion path. The red dots on each end of the motion path are called the control points, and you can reposition them and add more points to create a customized curving path. So I can take this dot, this is where I want it to start, this is where I want it to end. But I can also add points in between. If I hold the Option button down and then click on the line somewhere, it's going to create another point, and it has these control levers, if you will, that help me change what path I want this one to take. And I can hold it down again and create another one, and even make it turn or go side to side. I can move it along where I want it to be at that point. So it's going to start here and in there, and then it's going to follow this path as I move along. So you can see it's going along that path at the center. So I have stopped it at the end, and you can add a lot of those control points and the shapes that it takes, the direction that it takes, the speed. All of these are options in your HUD or in your inspector for the motion path as well. And once we get this to where we want it to be, we can go to Shift Z to change our window, our canvas, back to our fit like we did before. Again, we want to add our fade in to our 1986, so I'm going to hold down the Option button and then drag the fade in there. So now as it goes, it'll fade in as it's moving, and then toward the end it fades out. And you can see it's starting to fade out there. So I'm going to take this back to the beginning. And we can bring our other spin to it as well. This time I'm going to change this up where it's not as fast because we have it moving in another direction. And I can move both ways. So this adds a little bit of pizzazz to this type of motion. Fade in, fade out. All of our basic motions are really useful. So we've used 3 different methods to animate the 3 layers: to fade, spin, and then fall back or move in 3D space. To animate the rest of the date graphics, let's copy those behaviors into the remaining areas. So we're going to Option drag those 3 behaviors from any of the layers that we've worked with to any of the other date layers that haven't been animated. So from taking them from either 1986, or if we want to use the throw, from 1985. And we kind of want to mix it up a little bit, and we'll just copy those motions, those behaviors, into the other dates as we go along. So let's hold the Option button down when I select them, and then we'll take that and copy it to some other of the layers. And I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So I use the spin on those. I'm going to use the throw on the other ones. So I'm going to select those 3, and I can hold the Command button down and select each one, or I can hold the Shift button down to select the range. And then I'm going to hold the Option button down and drag them to the other remaining layers. So now I have some behaviors on each of the layers as we're working through them. And we'll stop there and continue on in our next video.